Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out.
Hey listeners, welcome to Two Middle-Aged Guys Trying to Work It All Out. This is Dave, and with me, as always, is my good friend...
Chris.
Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'll tell you, though, there's going to be some day that I'm going to come into the studio, and you're going to say, Chris, how you doing? And I'm going to be like, I'm terrible.
It's awful.
Yeah,
okay.
well, I don't know. How much time have you got? Because here it comes. But today's not that day, Dave.
Yeah,
I'm doing great.
Well, Chris, I'm excited to be back in TMAG Studios.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have an incredible topic today. And we're going to kind of jump right into it because this is going to be a packed episode. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. And I want to tell our listeners, we've got some exclusive deleted scenes from movies that, it's going to blow your mind.
You're not going to find these on DVDs, Blu-rays,
Not yet, right? I would talk a little bit about how I got these in a moment, but this is TMAG exclusive. We're going to get 10, 15 downloads at least on this episode. It's going to break Spotify.
That's exactly right. I hope that our servers can handle it.
Today we're talking about movies that have more than one version or alternate versions or different cuts. And for a long time, I did not have any concept that this existed. It kind of blew my mind when I first realized that you could find a film and that there was more than one way to watch the film. And it might change the story a lot. It might make it better, might make it worse. I wanted to start this topic by talking about the first time we realized that there was alternate versions of movies.
Okay.
Chris, what do you got? Lay it out for me.
So I will lay it out for you. The first time I realized it, but even when I realized it, I didn't quite know what it meant. So as a kid, we had a copy of Star Wars: A New Hope that was taped off of one of the local television broadcasts that the CBS or ABC or whoever ran.
Full frame with commercials.
Exactly right. Yep. And my parents knew that it was coming on, and they were with it enough to know that, oh, hey, Star Wars is a big movie. That doesn't come on all the time. You know, we're going to spend the enormous amount of money for a blank VHS. Back in the early 80s, it was like $20 for a single blank VHS when my parents were doing this. And we're going to capture this broadcast of Star Wars. So this is the Star Wars that I grew up with, and I watched it, and even with the commercials, rarely did I get up to
Was the tab
forward.
broken on the VHS tape so no one could record over it?
It was right. Fort Knox.
Sacrosanct.
Yes, in that VHS tape. No one was getting to that content. So, but I knew this Star Wars backwards and forwards. I watched it constantly. And then when I got a little bit older and I realized, not all movies exist on taped TV, versions, then we got an actual store-bought copy of Star Wars. And I put it in, and I knew that taped version of Star Wars so well that I detected very small audio differences. Audio differences, yes.
Okay.
So it wasn't, and back then, we're talking pre-special edition. So back then, the idea that, there's different versions of Star Wars floating around did not exist.
Sure. And it wasn't like your parents had a Dolby Digital Atmos, 9.1.2 setup in the house. Right? They were watching on probably a mono 19-inch TV.
Dave, we grew up together. They did.
Oh, that's right. That's right. They had the theater room.
Yeah.
No, your dad went into the future to get that equipment.
No, we didn't have any of that. But I mean, it was things like specifically when they're in the Death Star and they're trying to figure out where the princess is kept, and R2-D2 plugs into the seer, and C-3PO looks at the readout, and he's explaining to Luke and Han where Princess Leia is. In the version I had, it's silent over that. You just hear the ticking of the computer. And then on
bizarre.
It is bizarre. I don't know what happened.
Weird difference.
I know, but then in the regular store-bought version, 3PO is like, the princess is over here, and go down this corridor and turn left and hang right by the stormtrooper. I don't know why C-3PO.
You talk like a 30s man.
Exactly. Yeah.
Get out of here, you scallywags.
Anyway.
He was wearing a top hat in that version too.
So
were you watching Star Wars even? I'm curious. I'm concerned that maybe you were watching a different movie.
Now that you mention, no, but so again, a very minute difference, and really only the tip of the iceberg of what we're talking about. Like I have no idea why that little piece of audio was missing from the broadcast version. There was no reason for it, and in all the history of Star Wars, I've never heard anyone be like, "Oh yes, the version without the C-3PO descriptions on it." That's the boy. If only we had a copy of that one. That doesn't happen, but. I noticed it and I was like, that's weird because like in my mind as a small child, there was the movie and I was like, well, obviously they made the movie and now it's carved in rock and there is no altering of this movie. It will be here forever.
Right.
So when I saw
that's the way you saw films.
Exactly.
No, really,
Yeah.
in the 80s and in the 80s, right? I think things will change as we talked about, but in the 80s and before that, a movie was a movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so that concept of, hey, whoa, that was something different kind of blew my mind. And so that's when I realized there were different versions. Now, that's a very, like I said, the tip of the iceberg of what we're talking about with alternate versions. But that was the first time I was like, wait a second, these can be different.
That is very interesting. It's so subtle.
Yeah.
So that is a great example. TV edits versus real edits. And that one doesn't make any sense at all, right? It's not like they took out C-3PO's nude scene. They just had, it's very bizarre.
That's the whole film, actually. 3PO doesn't wear a stitch of clothing.
That's true. That's true.
In that whole
Maybe
movie.
that is clothing. Mine, so I would say yours is subtle. Yours is like a whisper. Mine is like a sledgehammer. Okay. My first introduction to alternate versions, I had watched the film Dune many times and never really understood it. It was often played on on weekday afternoons in the summer on one of the local UHF channels. And it was their afternoon movie pretty often, right? Along with other movies that we're going to talk about today. And it was like, as a kid, I was like, this is in space and that's cool, but I don't understand what's going on. It's so choppy and fast paced and you're trying to watch it. It's unlike any other movie, especially the first 45 minutes. It's unlike any other movie you've ever seen. Fast forward a few years later and the Sci-Fi Channel, when it was spelled with I's properly, not sci-fi, it's actually Sci-Fi. They started showing a version of Dune that was like 4 hours long. And it was great for them. They had no content. So Sci-Fi was like, oh, yeah, we'll show a 4 hour. You had commercials. That's like 6 hours. They get 2 nights out of that. They stretch that out. I think they often did, if I remember correctly. And I was blown away. Like, this is the same movie, but it is a different movie. And it totally changed my perspective on Dune. I loved the extended edition. And then I went back and watched the theatrical, and it's like, oh, it filled in some gaps. And then I also read the book, and gained an appreciation for David Lynch, the director. But it was very interesting to me. Yours is a whisper. Mine is a sledgehammer. It's a totally extended, stretched out movie from 2 hours and 7 minutes to nearly 4 hours, I think is how long the extended cut was. I mean, just imagine fleshing that out, right? Take your favorite movie that's 2 hours long, and imagine it's twice as long. But you've got stuff in it, right? And you think about that. That's pretty crazy. And so, to me, it was like, first of all, wow, you can have 2 versions of movies. The director, David Lynch, disowned and said, this is not my edit. I shot all this, sure, but I didn't get a chance to put it together. He disowned the extended edit, which is fine. I understand. But at the same time, as a fan, I appreciate it. Give me more, right? Give me every scene that you've got. And I'll take it and I'll enjoy it. But that was my first introduction. It was a totally different movie. Finding that today is not easy. I mean, it's out there. You can find it if you want to watch a bootleg, right?
Sure.
Legitimately, I think they maybe had a DVD some years back, but
did they? I'm blanking now. Did they include it on the limited edition 4K that they released?
I don't know if they did. I don't know if they did.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But I know they had a DVD at one point that's not easy to find.
Yeah.
Maybe it was on 2 DVDs, right? Like Lord of the Rings extended edition.
Couldn't store it on one. It's funny that you mentioned Dune though, because I was right there with you on the Sci-Fi Channel when they were running it, and I remember when they were premiering it, and they made a big deal. Like, this is the not the theatrical version. Right. This is the extended cut and blah. And like that was their whole marketing.
And it had like 20 minutes of like narration at the front too. It's like here you could understand it and Frank Herbert did the narration, I believe. Is that
I don't know.
It was another old man.
Yeah,
it was another old man. He was Frank Herbert. It could have been the guy who does the Hardee's commercials. I think it actually was Frank Herbert. I should have looked that up. That's on me. But Yeah, and it totally like made the movie like you could completely understand. Like it's spelled out. Here's this big world. It's very mysterious. We're going to give you your primer, right? The first 20 minutes is the introduction, and then you can dive into the film. And that it's interesting that first 20 minutes, a lot of like painted stills, right?
Yeah.
They're just like here's the planet Giedi Prime, and it's a painting of Giedi Prime. Here's the planet Arrakis, and it was a paint. It's very odd, but it was felt it was necessary,
and it's presented in a way where it kind of works.
It does.
Like it's not like
with the music too.
You didn't build the set for this, or you didn't have the money to take me to Giedi Prime. No, it's kind of a storybooky, kind of a historical thing. I know what you're talking about, and well, we'll probably get into the nuts and bolts of this later. But I miss the Princess Irulan narration whenever I watch the extended one.
No, it's and that's how different it is. I mean, they took out the narration that was in the theatrical version and replaced it. What was done by a young lady, replaced it with an old man and some pictures. He was showing like vacation pictures.
Which is why David Lynch doesn't like it.
I feel like I just talked myself out of liking the extended edition. You want to watch an old man with some space vacation pictures before you get into your 3.5-hour movie?
On the flip side, somebody who says yes to that question is going to love it.
They're going to love it. If I could go back and watch it on the Sci-Fi Channel, if it was on right now, I'd go in there and watch it. But
Dave, we're recording. Don't leave.
I got to go. I got to go check. No, it's Sci-Fi with a Y doesn't show good stuff anymore.
Okay.
So, there's no
we're
chance
safe.
of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's get into the fact that the director didn't like this movie. The director, David Lynch, did not like. First of all, it should be clear, he didn't really like the theatrical cut either.
True.
So, and he doesn't like the movie in general. He doesn't really like talking about it. But that being said, his name was not on the credits. So when they ran the credits for the Dune Extended Edition, it said Alan Smithy as the director, which is the placeholder they put in when they disown something.
And like an idiot, I go to my giant book of movies and I look up Alan Smithy to see what else he's done.
Yeah, I want to know. I'm into. Well, who's your favorite? Oh, man, Alan Smithy movies are great. That's terrible.
Do you know what that means?
Yeah. It's interesting that he had, and maybe this is not the right movie to discuss the director's vision because there is no reference point for him. The reference point is the movie he never got to make and never will make. But it is interesting that you've got a couple different versions, and one he absolutely won't even have his name on it.
Yeah, I feel like he's softened a little bit on Dune lately. If you look up David Lynch Dune, you can find interviews of him where he's like, "I didn't get to make the movie I wanted to, but it's fine, and I'm glad people like it out there, and I don't know who they are, but." And then he keeps rambling for 20 minutes.
But every word is interesting.
Oh, absolutely it is, yeah. So I think he's softened on Dune a little bit in his old age. And I think he's kind of coming to terms with it. And his stance is that he didn't fight for the movie he wanted to make. And he just kind of let the producers and Hollywood in general kind of bowl over him.
It was an $80 million movie. It was given to someone who obviously had talent. He had done The Elephant Man and then Eraserhead. But he did not have the capital to make those kind of arguments to really get what he wanted.
Yeah.
And
there was
probably was a mistake for him to do the movie. I'm glad he did it, but I'm sure in hindsight he thinks,
"Oh yeah,
that's probably not something I should have done." I believe he talks a little bit more like that, but
that's fair. Your Lynch is better than my Lynch.
Well, he also, he's hard of hearing. He's an FBI. Oh, wait,
no,
I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's a different character.
Sorry about that. Listener,
so there are people listening that have no idea.
I know they think that we two middle-aged guys just had a stroke on their podcast. We were talking about Twin Peaks, folks. Well, I'll tell you what, let's do this.
Okay.
I think we've beat Dune to death, but I think our listeners now need to be treated with an exclusive clip.
Oh.
So here's the deal. Here's what I got, and you don't even know this story, Chris. I'm not in the business. I am adjacent to the business. I know people in the business. I'm trying to get in. By the way, business, I'm doing quote marks for listeners. Business, quote unquote. The business of movie making. But I happen to know one of the two remaining Suncoast Video managers. Suncoast Video is a great store. You go in, you buy your VHS, you buy your DVD, you buy a T-shirt. There's only two of them left in America. But I happen to know one. She's very well connected. And she got an early copy of Goodfellas Ultimate Edition.
Wow.
To be coming out later.
Okay.
She leaked that to me, and I am going to leak that. Probably she won't speak to me anymore, but I'm going to leak that to the audience.
You're burning a bridge.
I am burning a bridge. Burning the Suncoast Bridge. It's an important bridge.
It's for the good of our listeners.
All right. So here you go, folks.
It's funny, It's a good story. You're a funny guy.
You mean the way I talk? What?
It's just, you're just funny. The way you tell the story.
But I'm funny how? Funny like a clown? Do I amuse you? Really? Do I make you guys laugh? I've been working on a bit, and oh, you know what? I'm just going for it.
He's getting on stage. Get ready, kid. This could go bad.
Hey, you all knows me. It's Tommy. How y'all doing tonight? Hey, have you ever held up a truck hauling, I don't know what, TVs or something, and you pull the driver out, and he's begging you, oh, please, I got a wife and kids at home. Don't shoot me. And I'm thinking, hey, buddy, wife and kids, I'm doing you a favor. Pop, pop, and one more pop, just to make sure. Stax knows what I'm talking about.
You know it.
Can you believe these gas prices? And they call me a criminal. My mom, you know my mom the same. She says to me, Tommy, you need to go look into one of those Toyotas. They get such good gas mileage. So I say, okay, Ma, sure. We go to the dealership, and you wouldn't believe this little car. It's a toy. I'm like, Ma, if I bought this, the only person I could fit in the trunk is Bob Newhart. I'm not going to whack Bob Newhart. Oh, and last week, you'll love this. I was collecting over by Moore's. Anyway, this guy owes me $15K, 15 on the nose, and he's begging me, no, come back next week. And I politely explained to him, I can't come back next week. I have a prior engagement. And he says, Tommy, what could be more important than 15 G's? I said, your funeral, pop, pop, pop. Oh, 3 shots. My hand was a little sore. Hey, Frenchie's here. French, how's your brother?
Tommy's dead.
Oh, that's right. I killed him. That story was about him. It's hard to keep track. Ping, pop, pow. You've been a great crowd. Tip your waitress. Pay your enforcers. Until next time, bing, bang, boom. Wow. All right. Boy.
I'm not going to say it's better than the scene that Scorsese chose, but that was some brave move right there. Brave acting.
I think I don't know if he would have won the Oscar had they gone with that cut. I think he would have taken the movie in maybe a different direction. Yeah. It's some good writing on Tommy. He just came up there and just he had his bit ready to go though. I mean,
now I want to see the version where he leaves a life of crime and becomes a stand-up
comic. Tommy, bing bang boom. Well, folks, it's a different, like alternate versions, right? That's how Goodfellas should have turned out. Yeah. Could have turned out, not should have. Excuse me. All right, so from there, right? Let's talk about the history of alternate versions, because I think that there is one that comes up in the early '90s that is, to me, like sort of the example of how alternate versions can raise a status of a movie. Mm-hmm. And could also become massive revenue generators for a movie that probably hadn't made money in years. That's Blade Runner.
Yes, it is in my mind the ultimate alternate movie.
Yes,
and it's got not only so many versions, but it's also one of the rare alternate movies where people like almost unanimously are like, "Oh yeah, that's better."
Well, okay. I like all of the versions.
Okay.
Every version of Blade Runner I've seen, I like because I like the movie.
Right.
That being said, I have a strong preference for the theatrical version.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. So Blade Runner is for the folks who are not aware of Blade Runner, but my goodness, go out and watch it. Watch any version you can get your hands on. Most likely, you're going to see one of the director ultimate cuts, whatever. The final cut, I believe, is what.
The final cut was the final
cut. But this movie came out in 1984. Ridley Scott has been tinkering with it for many years. The director. The big changes to these movies are: one, takes out the voiceover. Mm-hmm. And two,
so before you continue on, let me help the people who maybe don't know the film or haven't seen it in a long time. The theatrical version, Harrison Ford narrates the whole film. And it was put in there because the studios thought that the film was incomprehensible. And they're like, this is the only way we can fix it. And then Ford delivers a very, very monotone, dry voiceover that they put over certain scenes of the movie. And for years, fans have said, Ford's phoning it in. This was Ridley Scott's plan to get the studio to jettison it and ruin it. And Ford has said unequivocally, no, I don't phone anything in. That was the performance for the character. And, I didn't like the voiceover either, but I'm a professional. I'm going to do my job. So I believe him when he says that. The voiceover does match the character.
Yes.
But to me, it takes what is a beautiful oil painting and turns it into a photograph.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Thank you. That's the way I think of it. But so I just wanted to give that kind of primer of what the voiceover you're talking about is. And now, my friend, I will turn it back to you.
I happen to like the theatrical. I like all of them, right? I think I said that. So there's no shade on any version of Blade Runner. I think all the stuff he's done with it is good. But I prefer the theatrical version. The main differences are the voiceover that we talked about and some clues about Deckard's background. I won't get into that, but a scene that sort of intimates some things. about Deckard's background, and then the ending changes. A bit of the ending is removed, and it's not a happy ending. And not that the Blade Runner has a particularly happy ending, but this ends on a much darker note.
No, the theatrical end's happy.
No, I'm sorry. The theatrical end's happy.
Yes.
I was framed that poorly, but the alternate versions are much darker. So
Yes.
I prefer the theatrical version. The ending is fine either way. I mean, I the happy ending. Yeah, I think that you could have. I think actually. The happy ending's kind of silly. However, I like the theatrical version. I like the voiceover because I think it leads into this sort of sci-fi noir.
Yeah.
I mean, I really thought that
I figured
helped
you'd
that.
say that.
And I think it makes the character of Deckard, which I know I'm about to say something controversial, but it makes him more human.
Uh-huh.
And so I like that. That being said, though, this is a case where the film, Ridley Scott has released this film in different versions, but he's preserved of the original versions, so fans get to choose what they enjoy. I appreciate that so much, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, that is an excellent point that you make there, and I firmly fall into the director's cut camp of Blade Runner. There's nothing in the theatrical cut that is there for me. I mean, I'm out. I don't like the voiceover. I don't like the happy ending. The scene that's missing that you alluded to me, that's imperative to make the film the film. And so I love the director's cut. I mean, and I specifically mean the director's cut.
Like the one that came out in '92 that we
Yes.
got on VHS in widescreen. We're like, what the heck?
Widescreen?
What is the deal? Why is there black bars at the bottom and top? And then when you realize what they are, you only want to watch movies in widescreen.
Precisely. That was the start of our widescreen.
It was.
Yeah.
That movie represents so much.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of, I think it's the VHS I wanted the most.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Phantom Menace. Maybe, probably. But but it's also the introduction into we need a better medium and better TVs because widescreen was like, oh, clearly we need to see the whole picture. They're cutting this off.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And I had a friend in high school who had laser discs, and that was a fancy, foreign format that was unattainable to me. And they had Blade Runner on Laserdisc, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be stunning and amazing, and it was, except they only had the theatrical version.
Oh, okay. So
it,
you were.
it was a bit of a waste.
Not that much voiceover.
There isn't, but I mean, okay, I've said this before. Blade Runner is, without a doubt, my favorite film.
Yeah.
It is my favorite.
It's top 10
film
for me. So
so I mean, I'm over the top on Blade. This is how over the top I am. I was talking to another friend of mine about Blade Runner one day, and he says to me, "Okay, Chris, come on. The movie was made in 1983. You don't like it that much, do you?" And I pulled out my iPad and pulled up my Apple TV app, and I have Blade Runner downloaded on my iPad at all times.
it's
just in case.
Just in case you need the Tears and Rain monologue, or I need
Yes.
more life.
So
didn't they change that I need more life line also in the director's cut? I think they put a dirty word in.
So I don't think that's changed amongst the cuts.
Okay.
There is a story that Rutger Hauer would mix up the takes. And so the common story is, does he say, I need more life, father?
Or a
Or
bad
does he
word.
say, I need more life?
Beep.
Yes. And so the one, and I think it's in all of the cuts, he says, I need more life, beep.
Yeah. Okay. I remember. I'm
yeah.
thinking of the TV version, where he's his father, probably.
I don't know what he says in the TV version, actually. That's
I don't know, but it's another piece of lore. Also, I'm glad you brought up Rutger Hauer. I think we should bring him up every podcast. What a great actor!
Yeah, fantastic. It should have been huge. I mean,
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
overlooked
We
actor.
should talk about that more.
Yeah,
And he had. You know what he had in that movie? A great coat. He was wearing the coolest
Yes, he
coat,
did.
and the second coolest coat was worn by Harrison Ford.
Yes, it was.
There was great coats. And Matrix has nothing
That's
on the
true.
coats in Blade
That's true.
Runner.
If there were no Blade Runner, there would be no Matrix. Anyway, so I think it's important, just very quickly, because otherwise this will turn into the Blade Runner podcast.
It will. It will.
So there's the theatrical cut. There's the international cut. There's the cable TV cut. There's the director's cut. There's the work print cut. There's a cut out there, which is before they even finished the movie, and it's available. You can get a hold of it. Then there's the final cut, which Scott did in the early 2000s. Is that right? I'm a fuzzy on my date.
I thought it was a little later than
It
that.
may have been,
but
it may have been. Anyway, they did the final cut, and the director's cut, the one that we're talking about that really kind of ignited this, Scott didn't oversee 100%.
Yes.
He was like, "This is what I want to do.
Yep.
Go fix
Which
it."
was weird. I remember reading
yeah,
that thinking,
yeah,
why
yeah.
are you calling it the director's cut?
I know, it was weird. I think that was Warner Brothers marketing. But anyway, for Final Cut, he came back and he oversaw all of it. And it's fine. I have absolutely no problem with the Final Cut. I still prefer the 1992 director's cut. And the biggest reason is not because of any like little tweaks, because the editing tweaks he did, very, very minute.
Yeah.
But he changed the color in a lot of the film.
Interesting.
Yeah. The Final Cut has a very, very blue, very, very green tint to it. And none of the other cuts of Blade Runner do.
That is interesting.
So we're going to see in later examples in this conversation, we're going to see directors who don't, once they're like, here's the cut, they still keep making changes.
Yeah.
They can't even settle on, I got my director's cut, I'm walking away. It's like, no, we're going to keep tinkering.
Right.
But anyway, Blade Runner has a very long history of alternate cuts. And
but he lets you choose the one you want.
He does let
so
you choose.
Thank you, Ridley. You know what? I think part of it is just money too, right? They're like, oh well, every time we release one, people will buy it, and if we put them all in a package, everyone will buy them. I mean, this movie is printing money for them. 40 years later.
Yeah, and there's also a dogmatic outlook. I think Scott is okay with he's like, oh, here's the history of the film. This is what happened, and go for it. Whereas other directors are like, no, it's got to be my one vision, and that's all.
Well, let's talk about those other directors.
Oh.
Let's talk about the next set of movies.
All right.
That got their special editions and were very much changed, and that is Star Wars.
Oh,
right? We're gonna
those
beat
movies.
Star Wars to death here. So let's not go so deep into Star Wars. The changes, maybe I guess high level, right? The first one had some pretty big changes, right? Insertion of a new scene.
So here's
lots of special effects.
Here's what I'll say, and then I'll let you have your take. You can make an argument that there are scenes in A New Hope that did not come to fruition the way everybody would have hoped that they did. They were inventing a lot of the special effects that went in to make that movie. So the argument to go back and say, I want to fix these special effects is a strong argument. And when I was sitting there as an audience member in 1997 watching the special editions of A New Hope, I was like, whoa, these CG X-Wings look so much better. Whoa, I can't believe that, they fixed the blah, 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 or whatever. Now that I look at them now in 2024, those digital effects have aged very poorly.
Very poorly, yeah.
Very poorly. And so I am much more impressed at the craftsmanship of the original 1977 version.
Yeah.
The models, and even though you could say, oh, well, the X-Wing can't move the way it does in the special edition, I don't care. It's
real.
Nicer. Yeah. I mean, there's just something to it.
It's got weight. It's got its mass. I mean,
So-
it is something you can.
Yeah,
It's tangible.
So I think that is the shame of the special edition. Shame's a strong word. I think that's the unfortunate side effect of the special editions is the fact that those changes that were supposed to fix everything actually ended up really, really dating that film.
They're glaring.
Yeah.
They are. When you go back and watch those films, particularly, I think A New Hope is maybe the most like, it's like, oh, that it looks like I switched to a different movie at times because it's like, well, that doesn't belong there. This is a desert scene and you've got some cartoon thing walking through it that looks awful, right? There is, and I think that the Second Empire, it got probably the kindest treatment.
Agreed.
I mean, you can watch it and it's like, okay, it's pretty minor. There's little changes. Return of the Jedi, absolutely unwatchable. I think the special editions are.
I'll say this just so everybody can say, boy, two middle-aged guys, those guys are fair. The different music at the end during the celebration, I love that piece that John Williams wrote. I mean, I adore that music. And
I was too busy burning down the theater when that happened.
So you
I was
I
so
haven't heard it.
angry.
Okay, that's reasonable. No, so it's not all bad, right? And I'll say that, like that, and I know people are like, but we missed the Jub Jub song. It's like, no, that
I do miss the Jub Jub.
Well, I'm sorry
because that's the way it was.
it was, but
Write that awesome piece for something new.
That's fair. And I have my special edition Return of the Jedi CD soundtrack that nobody can take away from me, so I can listen to that at any point. But I think the crux of the Star Wars argument is that you don't have the choice which one you watch.
Exactly. It is. It's they locked us out. He. And really, I'll blame Lucas at some point.
He deserves it.
He deserves that. He locked us out from the original versions, and it's fine to tinker and to say I want to make something new and fill in the gaps or, update the technology or what have you. But do like Ridley Scott did and create that history, right?
Yes.
Revisions are fine. Leave the history.
Yeah.
And he did not do that. In fact, he seems almost like willful about it, right?
Yeah.
Like he wants to disown those and I realize he doesn't own Star Wars anymore. I still think Disney needing money is going to go and restore those original ones. The bootlegs that are out there are so good.
Yes, they absolutely are. But I have no inside baseball to this, but I would bet money that not releasing the original versions of Star Wars is in the contract.
Part of the deal.
Yeah,
oh my gosh!
I would bet that it is. Now there have been statements that are like, it has nothing to do with that. It's that they physically don't exist anymore because when Lucas did the special editions, he changed the print. Well, you just referenced the bootlegs.
The bootlegs, which are darn good.
They exist.
Yeah, they exist. And if people not making money off them can create nice 4K versions of the theatrical edition from reels, I guess, that were shown in the theater and other sources, and they can put it together and make it look awesome.
Yeah.
Then Disney, with all their resources and access to things that people don't have,
could do it.
Absolutely could do it. But I think that it's so interesting that Lucas did it in such a way that damaged the original.
Well, it damaged
jerk.
an original, right?
Well,
I mean,
right.
And I'm sure that if Disney wanted to, in fact, they probably do in their vaults have an original 35 reel of the theatrical cut.
I take back what I said about it. He's not a jerk. I just don't understand.
I don't either. And to me, as somebody who has created things and put them out in this world, I can understand looking back at something and being like, oh, that pains me. I wish I'd done this differently, or I wish that looked better, or yada, yada, yada. But I feel like the historical argument outweighs all of that. And the fact that people grew up with these films in the condition that they were, or in the iteration that they were, maybe is the better word, that should be an option now. And I would go to my grave defending George Lucas's right to alter and change and add and subtract and do whatever he wanted. But on that shelf should be all the different versions.
I completely agree, and that is the difference between what he has done and what Ridley Scott has done, and that is the difference in some of these. We're going to talk about more where there's issues with that. I will say one last thing about this: Disney, take my money because I will buy those theatrical versions.
Can you imagine how much they would make?
It would be right. And that's what I'm thinking. At some point, and maybe. I hate to say it. Maybe they can't do any of this till George Lucas dies.
Maybe.
And they're sending assassins to his house right now to Skywalker Ranch.
He's a smart man. In that contract, it's like if I die of anything other than natural causes, the acid will be dropped on the 35 millimeter print.
They'll have ninjas shoot poison into his mouth while he sleeps, and it'll look. Disney's smart. Take my money, Disney. So those are huge, famous ones, right? And there's more that we're going to talk about. Alien.
Yeah.
Aliens and Alien 3, A3, are a set of movies that got, you had director's cuts with the first two, or I guess a director's cut for the first one, Alien, an extended edition for Aliens, and then there are like work print and assembly editions of Alien 3 trying to fix the movie. I don't think it needs to be fixed. I'm going to say I like Alien 3. I've never been one that was like, oh, that's a bad movie. It's a good movie. The fact that it didn't have Corporal Hicks in it is a bummer, but it's not a bad movie. But Alien and Aliens got different versions. Big famous movies. Alien was a the addition of a scene, the scene where you see that the alien is taking the people it's killing on the ship and cocooning them into something and probably going to plant eggs in it and make more aliens. It's a very scary scene. I have no issue with it, right? I can watch it. I can watch the original version. That's perfectly fine. I don't. Yeah. That's one of those sort of innocuous injections that could have also been an additional scene on the DVD, and I would have been fine to see that.
I'll also say that I'm only a passing fan of the Alien franchises. I'll watch them and I'll be like, okay, that was a good movie, but they're not on my regular rotation. I don't seek them out that often. And in fact, I don't even really know the history of these alternate versions.
I don't either.
Okay, I was going to ask you, but if you don't,
money,
that's fine. Well, I
quest for more money.
So my question and where I was building to that was, especially Aliens, Cameron's movie, it was just like, oh, we cut 17 more minutes into the movie. Did Cameron ask for that? Was he like, oh, these 17 minutes make a huge difference, or was that when DVDs were the hot thing,
Yep.
the idea of extra stuff was the
big.
hot thing.
Man, it was so big. Everybody
Yeah.
would be like, "Oh, let's check out the deleted scenes
and
before
so
you watch the movie."
Was Fox just like, hey, we got 17 extra minutes of Aliens?
No, yeah. But I will say this: like, so Alien, I'm not pro or con. Aliens, the extended edition, is the only way to watch that movie. I think it adds. I've always felt like Aliens was a good movie that I wanted more of, and Aliens, the extended edition, gives me that more, right? It gives you a little bit more insight into what happened on LV-426, the planet where the aliens are. It gives you more insight into Newt and how she got there. It's got that cool scene with the sentry guns. I think it's just a better movie.
Oh, yeah, that Sentry Gun scene is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's just a better movie, right? And I think it elevated it. There's nothing wrong with Aliens.
Yeah.
I prefer Alien to Aliens, and I know you...
I'm the other way.
You're the other way.
Yeah.
So I like a scary, in-space, quieter movie, but Aliens, the extended edition, to me, it brings more to that world, and I really enjoy that.
I could take it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know, certainly the additions don't harm the movie, and we will talk about some where I feel the additions harm the movie. I don't think this is one of the case. You know, if somebody's like, let's watch Aliens, I'm not even going to ask them which version.
One, right? Yeah.
Just like, yeah, let's watch Aliens.
Yep. So, and then you get Alien 3, which has got people trying to fix what they think is a flawed film.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, okay, whoa. When outsiders come to try to fix a movie, it's one thing when the director, when someone who was involved with the ownership of the film wants to change something, wants to add something, refine something. That's one thing. But when outside folks say, okay, this was a mistake. Let's take some work print footage. Let's change some things around. I absolutely do not like that. The fan edit type stuff.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Yeah, I agree. And Fincher's refusal to be involved in it. I don't know if that speaks to apathy, frustration, or if he feels like, well, the movie is what the movie is.
Right.
I don't know Fincher that well. I say that like I'm hanging out with, you know.
He lives down the street.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's pretty casual, our relationship.
So I don't know a lot of the history of that, but I completely agree that if the director is not the one spearheading these alternate versions, I do not think they should exist.
That is interesting. Another big one, Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say up front, I don't like this movie.
At all?
I like scenes. There are scenes that I like.
Yeah.
The scene with Robert Duvall, I mean, is incredible.
Yeah.
There are scenes that I like. But as a movie, I feel dirty when I watch it. I feel sad. I don't, you know, I just don't get it, and I don't like it. That doesn't mean it's not a good movie. It just means that
Sure.
it really missed for me. And I like Coppola.
Yeah.
That movie misses for me. That being said, that redo, they called it Redux. Hot Shots, Part 2, and redo. I don't know why. I feel very silly. There's one of those words I mispronounce. It's a word you don't use. You know, like, man, I'm going to go around and redo that with an X. I'm redoing it with an X. Not the redo that English people use, but the one with an X. The sound, what they've done with the sound edit on that, whoa. If you listen to that in Dolby Atmos, the Apocalypse Now, the new one, I mean, that is a sound system tester. Those helicopters, I mean, you know when you're surrounded by those helicopters, your Atmos is doing its job. So from a technical point of view, I'm like, bravo. But from a theatrical point of view...
So I adore Apocalypse Now. I think it's the greatest war movie that Hollywood has ever created. I think the history and the making of the movie is the stuff of legend, and I think it is an absolute miracle that from the mess of that production came a movie that is not only coherent, but is actually incredible to watch. So I have a very high regards for Apocalypse Now. That being said, I am theatrical cut all the way. All the way.
Even with the sound?
Okay, so I have good news for you.
Oh, okay. All right.
In the latest 4K version that they released of Apocalypse Now, which has all three cuts of the film in it, if you care, the soundtrack is pretty much the same across the board. So it's there.
Okay.
Also, I would throw out a statement that Apocalypse Now is the first surround sound film ever.
Really?
Yeah. So before Apocalypse Now, it was two channels, right or left and right, and Apocalypse Now created two channels in the back. And it was actually a problem exhibiting the film because of that.
Yeah.
Like theaters had to get on board. And for a while, Coppola had this idea that he's like, I'll build a theater in the middle of the country, and it'll show Apocalypse Now from now until the end of time, and people will make a pilgrimage to come see Apocalypse Now.
Did he really have that idea?
He really had that idea.
And then George Lucas is like, listen, buddy, I'm gonna create THX. I'm gonna go around to every theater in America.
But
I'll get it done.
Part of me wishes he had.
That's a crazy idea. I think it would have been very sad for him when it was not successful after a couple months.
But anyway, so I will agree that the redo's audio is tremendous. Walter Murch, who we've talked about on this podcast before, he edited and sound designed Apocalypse Now, and he was instrumental in all of the re-releases and the re-edits and that kind of thing. To me, it's just not necessary. And Coppola does have this obsession with, retreading and redoing. And I think Apocalypse Now is a unique example in Coppola's filmmaking catalog, because that movie got away from him so many times, and he still managed to wrangle it down and create it into something. So I think because of that, he kind of feels like I'm still playing. I want to go back to that clay.
That is interesting. My understanding is that because of the way he did it, the original prints are now. Is there an issue with the original prints because of the way Coppola did it?
I'm not familiar with anything. And that the 4K that they did, where it's got all 3 cuts of the film, that came out fairly recently.
Okay, good.
And it was such like a cheap package. I mean, you got all 3 editions of the film.
I think I bought
plus special
it digitally.
Features, and I got the discs.
Test out my sound.
I got the discs for like $15 for the and it wasn't like nobody wants this. It was like, hey, brand new, we're going to give you a deal. So kudos to them for that.
A marketing standpoint, though, I mean, it's tough to get people to rebuy a movie like that. I would imagine, right? It's a smaller audience.
I feel like the people who are going to be buying 4K movies at that level are the people who are going to be buying Apocalypse Now.
Okay, that's a reference film, one of the greatest films ever made. Sure. I mean, listen, when I say I don't like it, and I don't, it's not a technical thing.
No.
The movie's
Absolutely.
beautiful. And I think any individual scene that you watch, you can find something good about. Although I hate the opening scene with Martin Sheen in the bedroom and the door song. Right? Yeah, it makes me dislike that Doors song. I just hate that scene. And you know me. I mean, Martin Sheen. I'm Joe Estevez. His brother Joe Estevez is a better actor. Check him out on IMDb. He'll come to your house and act for you. He looks just like Martin Sheen, but he has no talent. His name is Joe Estevez.
Be kind.
I had
he's
to
got
get
some
that
talent.
in.
All right.
He has very little talent.
He was in Soul Takers.
He was in
a classic.
Werewolf and Ghost Baby and many other movies.
My notes continue on past Apocalypse Now.
My notes do as well. The next thing we want to talk about, and I think this is a great example of something that was going on in the zeitgeist of changing movies. Yeah. Spielberg got into it like, I'm going to change E.T. 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
And, he CGI some stuff, and then the most infamous, I think, of all of them, turning the guns from the FBI agents into walkie-talkies.
Yeah, and I think Spielberg's heart was in the right place, but his brain wasn't.
Yeah,
and I think he would agree with that because he's kind of gotten to a point where he didn't have children when he made E.T. At least I don't think he did. And now he's a father and he's got many kids and so the idea
many kids are tiny.
Manny Manny Many.
I say it Manny.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know. You also say Redukes.
I say Redukes.
So
you should hear me say hyperbole.
Hyperbole?
Hyperboil is how I pronounce that word. When you don't hear words and you read them, you tend to mispronounce them. No one around me is using the word hyperbole. I almost said hyperboil.
You're right. Anyway, so Spielberg, I can understand the logic, right? Like I made this kids movie, but it's got this scary component in it, and I wish I hadn't done that, and let's take it out. But I will give Spielberg all the credit in the world because he's like, that was dumb.
That was a mistake. Here's his quote. He regrets it. No film, this is a Spielberg quote, no film should be revised based on the lenses we are now either voluntarily or being forced to peer through.
Yeah.
What a powerful quote.
No doubt. Yeah. And that was when George Lucas said, I'm never speaking to you again.
Right, he cut him off. He actually had Spielberg's beard removed because Lucas is in charge of all beards. I don't know if you know that.
I did not.
Yes.
I hope my beard is sanctioned.
Well, if you wake up one day and you don't have a beard, you know that Lucas had it removed.
He heard this podcast.
Yes, he sent the beard fairy to you.
But that's a brilliant quote from Spielberg.
It is, and I love it because I think it does kind of, and I called it the zeitgeist at the time because there was this. Let's go and
absolutely,
let's change our movies, let's make them better, and
we have the technology
but
now.
it's interesting. It got that Goodfellas DVD. Scorsese did also replace all the guns with walkie-talkies, and one of the cuts of Goodfellas is very different. The spider gets shot to death with a walkie-talkie in the basement.
It is
makes sense.
It doesn't.
Doesn't work for every movie.
And again, in his defense, he went with the regular edition. So good for him. Right.
So I think that's a great one, and I love Spielberg's kind of coming around. I think the 30th anniversary just kind of restored everything, and you can watch it.
Yep.
Without the
and this will not be the last time we talk about Spielberg. So.
I know it won't. Just real quick, I want to mention just a shout out to all the Highlander fans out there. Highlander, the original movie, has a director's cut, which adds 2 meaningless scenes that were with people with accents you can't understand half of what they're saying, and then Highlander 2, The Quickening, one of the most laughably bad movies ever made, has many attempts of fans going out trying to fix it. And there's no fixing that movie. It should have never been made. Highlander it needed to stop. It was when you look at it on its own, it's a fine, fun film that makes you want to go buy swords and stab your friends on accident. But when you start to look at everything that came after that, I think that I only bring that up as an example of a bad movie. Just leave it alone. Don't try to fix it. I get it right.
I thought you were bringing it up to apologize for stabbing me with a sword.
I apologize about that.
You know what? It's all forgiven.
I wish we would have been fighting with walkie-talkies.
It would have been less painful.
Well, of course, I would have had like a sharpened antenna on an accident. Well, the tip fell off. That's why they put that tip on there, because it's super sharp.
And then I didn't know that. Okay, well, good to know.
Well, I think I want to talk about what I think is an interesting one. Is Lord of the Rings.
This is an interesting
one because you have Lord of the Rings, the theatrical versions, brilliant films. Yep. I love them, right? And up there with Star Wars.
Yep.
And honestly, for me, if you said, "Hey, Dave, you want to watch A New Hope or you want to watch Fellowship?" I'm big. Put Fellowship on. That's where I'm at. I love those movies. You go watch them in the theaters, you love them. And then all of a sudden on DVD, he comes and says, "Listen, I've took this 3-hour movie and I made them each 4 hours long." And you're like, give me more. You could triple it and I'd still watch it. And they're the reference now. No one watches the theatrical version. Oh, my goodness. Folks, he's raised his hand. I'm sorry. You don't see that.
Okay, so here's where I fall on the extended edition Lord of the Rings. And my dear wife is cursing my name right now if she's listening to this podcast because she is diehard extended edition.
Well, you should be.
And she is just like you. She's like, they could not put enough in this movie for me. And I understand and I respect that. And I will watch the extended editions and I will do so happily. To me, the theatrical cuts are so well paced.
Yes.
And I lose that with the extended edition. So the theatrical cuts, in my opinion, are better movies, and the extended edition are better for the Tolkien people.
Sure, but I also think if you're looking at them in a movie and you're sitting there, sure, you watch them because you're right. The pacing is it's tighter and it's consistent in the theatrical versions, where it's less consistent in the extended editions. But I think you take the extended editions and you watch them, and you're no longer watching 3 movies. You're watching one giant epic. And I think that's if you view it like that, then...
And that's fair.
The pacing doesn't become as much of an issue because it's more like watching 12 episodes of a TV series.
And you're fair. And I'm going to go back and reiterate a point that we've made, which is, to this day, I can go to the store and I can buy either one.
Yep. Because they want your money.
Yes. And they have allowed them to continue existing. And so good on Peter Jackson for that. And, he never once filmed or added the Tom Bombadil scene from Fellowship of the Ring.
I know.
And I'm grateful for that. Because I don't need that Tom Bombadil scene in my Lord of the Rings.
Boy, I am of two minds on that. I would love to see it, but it probably wouldn't. He as a character is so darn confusing.
Yeah.
Because everyone would be like, okay, why didn't this dude just take the ring?
I was the only person in the release day of Fellowship of the Ring that when they run into the forest and we cut to the evil forces, then we cut back and they run out of the forest, I cheered. I was like, there is no Tom Bombadil in this movie. I was happy.
All right. So in my mind, they've become definitive. the extended editions. And I'll say one of the reasons why is if you go on to watch TNT on any Saturday afternoon, they're playing those movies. They do not play the theatrical ones, and I trust TNT is my source. That's your source of truth. That's the touchstone.
Okay.
Where they've got it, that's where I'm at. Real quick, I don't know why this is here in the timeline here because this movie was made a billion years ago. Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Yeah.
A movie that has so many versions.
Yeah.
And I owned some of them on, I don't know why, because I thought it was important or cool. Have you ever been able to sit through that whole awful, boring movie?
I think it's interesting, but again, I'm the film buff, film history.
Right,
like that's my bread and butter. So yeah, I've seen Metropolis. I think it's
with the Queen soundtrack. Have you?
No.
There is one with the Queen soundtrack.
I have not seen that. No.
Or maybe it's a rock soundtrack that's in the style of Queen. Now
Fair. Yeah, because Queen did the Highlander soundtrack
and the Iron Eagle soundtrack.
Yeah. So anyway, so I do not like all of these other versions of Metropolis. Metropolis should absolutely be preserved and available and viewable by anybody
as a piece of history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it should darn well be the one Fritz Lang did.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a colorized version. I don't want to see the 1970s re-edit or whatever that thing was.
There's so many versions.
And this goes back to a point we made earlier, which is Fritz Lang is not making these versions.
Right.
So that to me, that's the crux of it.
It's interesting because it's in public domain, which means, and so is Night of the Living Dead. And that's why there are so many different versions and edits. I think that they honestly just get released because people can release them because it's public domain. Because famously they forgot to put something on. Yeah. There's a copyright thing they forgot to do, and
they lost it.
Yeah, what a poor Romero. Actually, I feel bad. He should have been given a do-over, a redo, if you will, with an X. An interesting one, especially the way I've sequenced these. Is a version of the second Deadpool movie called Once Upon a Deadpool, where they took an R-rated movie, slapped a couple Christmassy things sort of on it, cut it down to PG-13, and re-released it at Christmas so you could take your kids to see the movie that they wanted to go see, but you wouldn't let them because it was rated R. But now it's okay because they just took some of the bad words out of it. It's a very interesting idea, right? Ryan Reynolds is. I've got to believe he was behind this. He probably wasn't, but I want to believe he was because he seems so smart.
Yeah. So when you put this on our list, I didn't know anything about this. I vaguely remembered seeing a poster, but I was like, I'm not into Deadpool. That's not my thing. So I just completely ignored it. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. You'll have to lead the conversation here. And you were like, you should look into this.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And I did, and I'm glad I did. And in the research I did, yes, Ryan Reynolds was involved. Yep. He came up with the framing device for it, the kind of the Princess Bride takeoff of it. Yeah. So that was Ryan Reynolds' idea, and then he didn't want to cut it to PG-13. That was the studio that wanted to do it. So the deal they made is Reynolds said, okay, if you will donate a percentage of the profits to charity, then I'll let you cut it to a PG-13.
Interesting.
And Fox said sure.
Sure.
So that's where that came from. But I will say, just in researching this, I was struck by the idea of it, and I'm surprised we don't see more of this. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing, and I don't want to see more of this personally, but this seems like a very natural progression for Hollywood. It's like we've put in the money to make this movie up front. Oh, we could just change a few things here and there, and we could release it again. So I'm surprised that Hollywood hasn't really grabbed onto this and made this something that they do over and over and over again. I'm glad they haven't. Again, I'm going to say that. I don't want to see this happen again. And I'm guessing it's because it only did about $50 million in box office that Fox was like, oh, you know what? That wasn't even worth it. And we had to give so much of that to charity. Oh, my goodness.
So Ryan Reynolds' cell phone company was the charity.
Oh, does the Mint Mobile not count? That's where I give all my money to.
It's a nonprofit.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a very interesting example of an alternate version of a movie.
It is.
Do you know if you can get this on home video?
I own it on,
really?
The digital version.
So it's out there.
It's out there. Oh, sure. Okay. It came out and I bought it because that was at the time. At the time, I was buying everything that was Marvel, whether it was released by Fox, Sony, or Disney or Marvel. And I don't do that anymore because I've lost interest. But I bought it, and I took my son to see it in the theaters because it was like PG-13, and he was 14, I think, at the time, or 13. This is great. He wanted to see Deadpool so bad, we wouldn't let him. Now he had an opportunity to see it. Very smart. I don't know. I think it's smart. I don't know. Something about it I just liked. And maybe in a unique situation with Deadpool where you have this R-rated comic book character, but the kids really want to see it because it looks awesome.
I'm curious, when you took your son to it, was he satisfied with that?
Oh yeah, he loved it.
Okay.
Yeah, he loved it. He thought it was great.
Because I feel like if I had been that age and my dad would have been like, it's the PG-13 version, I'd be like, this isn't the real one.
That did not strike him.
Okay.
He wasn't thinking about it that way, nor would he
But
care.
honestly, now that we're having this conversation, Blade Runner has ruined my life because it's made me think in these terms where
Really?
it's like, that's not the real version. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I Blade Runner's brought richness and light and goodness to my life. So
that's good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it's affected you this
No,
way.
it's fine.
Maybe it's you.
Yeah.
And not Blade Runner.
Surely not.
Let's talk about another Francis Ford Coppola movie, and
Okay.
that we've talked about before real briefly, but that is Godfather Coda, which is Godfather Part 3, with edits so subtle, most people, even fans like me who appreciate Godfather 3, make jokes about it being the lesser of the trilogy. But still, I really struggle to see the difference. To me, it's fine. If Coppola says this is a version you should watch, and I struggle to see the differences, then I'm going to go with what he says. But it's an interesting one where he needed to make some minor changes, I guess, to satisfy something that felt undone to him, and he made it. And you can still get both versions.
Right. Yeah, and Coppola is an interesting director. And kind of like what we talked about with Apocalypse Now, he's such an auteur filmmaker where he's like, this is my vision and I've got to make it. And he's had such a difficulty in his career with studios messing with his work, and saying, oh, you can't do it that way. I can understand why that would breed this kind of desire that's like, 5 frames, if I could take out 5 frames, it would be perfect, So I'll give him this one. I don't care one way or another. This is my Aliens answer where it's like, if you're going to make me watch The Godfather 3, whichever.
It's subtle enough, too, that unless you are looking for it, you're not going to notice the differences.
Yep.
It's not like, the Vito comes back to life and saves Sofia Coppola's character.
Now this is the one where they put the digital like rock and roll act in the middle of it, right? That's Godfather 3?
No, that's Godfather 2.
Oh, okay.
That's the cut of Godfather where they make it linear. That's a TV cut.
I know.
It's awful.
Yeah, where it's all in chronological order.
Yes.
It is awful. I don't know
So
why.
stupid.
I don't know why they did that one.
TNT did that. So maybe I should reevaluate my stance on TNT as being the source of all truth.
I feel like maybe we should look that one up. I feel like Coppola was involved in that.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I think he was. Because I think he was like, wouldn't it be interesting if this was chronological? And so he did it. And of course, he's selling it and it's on TNT and everybody's like, this is the way to watch it. And then a couple of years later, he's like, no, that's not the way to watch.
I made a huge mistake. Yeah. Thank you for the money. I'm going to make Megalopolis someday.
I cannot wait to see that movie. I don't know anything about it, but I want to see it.
Well, so that is a minor one, but an interesting one.
Yep.
So a bigger one, I think, is another Spielberg movie.
Yes.
Which is Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah. So I put this one on our list because I think it's important to talk about because of how it went down. Spielberg made Close Encounters, and he was not the Spielberg that we know. He was just coming off of Jaws, so he was the hot ticket, but he had not yet made just hit after hit after hit. So he was over budget, over schedule on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And the studio basically said, you got to stop it, man. This is what we gave you and you've run out. And he was like, please, I want to shoot the scene with the ship in the desert. And they're like, even that sentence alone doesn't make any sense. So no, you're done. You've made your movie. And so then when Close Encounters becomes this incredible hit, he goes back to the studio and he says, 30 grand, that's all it's going to take for me to shoot this boat in the desert shot that I want. And they're like, okay, fine, but we're not going to do a whole other version just for that. And he's like, okay, I tell you what, when Dreyfus goes in the alien ship at the end, we'll go in there too. We'll see what the alien ship's like on the inside. And the studio's like, yeah, that sounds good. So they gave him the money to let him finish it. It releases as the special edition. And this was before Star Wars had a special edition. Spielberg was way on top of this. So it releases as a special edition. It's got this extra scene in the desert, which is fine. Does it change the movie? No, it's fine. And then at the end, you see inside the alien ship. Well, a few years go by, and Spielberg's like, That was artistically the wrong choice. We should never see inside the ship. That is the purview of the imagination. So then they did the director's cut of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which kept the ship and lost the inside of the alien vessel.
All right.
So here you've got a situation where Spielberg's in charge, ostensibly in all three. Granted, in the theatrical cut, he couldn't do everything he wanted, but he spearheaded the special edition. He spearheaded the director's cut. But it's this weird amalgam where he's really honing it, and he's saying, "Oh, I went too far here. Let me pull it back," and blah blah blah. And again, the conceit of our talk here is you can get all three today.
Yes. Yep.
So, if you liked the fact that you saw inside the alien mothership at the end, hey, that version's available to you. Go for it. If you feel like that wasn't necessary, then you don't have to live with it. And for my money, I'm going with the third one. I'm going with the director's cut. It's got the extra scene, fine, great. It does not go into the alien ship. I prefer that thematically, story-wise. So I have it, and I'm happy. And
are there any like AV improvements? Like, does he clean up the picture, clean up effects, do something with the audio in any of the versions, or is that just...
So as they were releasing, I don't actually know the answer to that question. But now if you go buy the big Blu-ray box set or the 4K box set, they're all good. It's not like some of the Blade Runner versions where it's like, even though I bought this on Blu-ray, this work print version is kind of rough.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's like any of these are watchable. Any of these can be your definitive version of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I'm going to make an admission here. I don't like this movie. I find it very boring.
It is. Yeah. It's one of my absolute favorites.
It's in my top asleep 10. When I try to watch it. It just doesn't work for me. I don't know. There's something about Dreyfuss's obsession that it's like, I'm not interested in this. And it's not like I do watch other movies with people who are obsessed. I think Christian Bale's The Mechanic is a movie about someone who's obsessed, and I find it terrifying but watchable. But when Richard Dreyfuss is obsessed, the most interesting thing is that the mashed potatoes look pretty tasty. So for some reason, that movie does not click with me.
Okay, we won't dwell on this, but when was the last time you saw it?
Oh my God, it's been decades.
Okay. I find Close Encounters of the Third Kind to be one of the most spiritual movies I've ever seen in my life.
Okay. All right.
And it's one of my absolute favorites, and maybe you should give it another shot.
I will put it on my list. Yeah, I like Spielberg in general, broadly, but for some reason that movie just does not click.
Yeah.
I will give it another shot. But we're getting close to the end here, and we have another exclusive alternate scene from, folks, you won't believe this, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer.
Did this come from your Suncoast?
Came from the same source. She sent me both the Goodfellas Super Ultimate Edition and Oppenheimer's edition directed by Alan Smithy, the Alan Smithy edition. Chris Nolan has totally said, I don't want any of this stuff out there, but no, the studio said, you're printing money for us, Chris. We're going to release this. Everybody's going to want to see, and it does have an alternate ending.
Wow. Okay, I can't wait to hear.
All right, folks, here you go.
3, 2, 1. Robert, you've done it.
It's a conflicting achievement.
The cloud is massive.
It's going far higher than I expected. It's turned into a column of fire. Oh no.
What is it, Robert?
It's spreading. General, the worst has happened. The .00 chance is upon us. We have ignited the ozone.
I'm a general, Robert, not a scientist. Tell me what this means.
We have set the sky on fire.
Steve, get over here now.
Yes, sir. Hey, Dr. Oppenheimer, congratulations.
Steve, tell us what happened.
Oh, well, I pushed the button.
Look at the sky, Steve.
Oh, yeah, it looks like it's on fire. Is it supposed to look that way?
No, Steve, it's not. Something has gone wrong. What did you do?
Well, when the voice said 1, I pushed the button, the red button.
Hey, Robert, the wife and I have a vacation planned to London later this year. Her first time flying. Since the sky is on fire, should we change our plans and go by boat? The ocean is fine, right?
Steve, what went wrong?
I don't know. I just pushed the button. I don't even know how any of this works. I don't even know what an atom is.
The lower atmosphere is starting to burn. The fire is coming to us. Steve, you have become death, destroyer of worlds.
I have?
Someone call my wife on the radio phone. Tell her to pull the Mercury into the garage. I just waxed it, and I don't want anything to happen to the finish.
That is different.
It's a choice.
It is. I'm assuming that they all died and the movie ended there. So at that point, I guess it's like a 2.5 hour movie.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's definitely. I mean, we talked about pacing earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe that's studios like that. They could get extra showings in.
Extra showings. It kind of sped it up,
Yeah,
right? I'm surprised he filmed that.
Well,
I'm surprised he filmed that. I hope. I mean, the thing about it is that if it had been in the movie, the guy playing Steve would have had a shot for an Oscar. Which,
true, best supporting.
Seemed very upset.
Yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe it was a Downey Jr. play. He's like, this will never see.
This will never see the light of
day.
day. I don't know, but I do think it shows some insight into Oppenheimer's character that he immediately blamed poor Steve.
Steve has
put that on him. Don't put that evil on me. That's what Steve should have said back. The other thing about that is they sound different in that clip than the actual character. So I don't know what's up with that.
Movies go through audio sweetening processes. I mean, a lot of these like extra features that you see on DVDs and stuff, the color's off, the sound's off.
They sound like different people.
Right. That's
okay. All right. Well, or bad impressions. Yeah, I get it. Well, folks, that's super. I mean, again, I'm expecting if we don't break Spotify, we should get a cease and desist letter. Not from the studios. We'll get that one, too. But from Spotify saying, guys, you are, with these exclusives, the TMAG Nation rising up to.
Because of TMAG's download, 3 people could not get Joe Rogan. So,
yes.
That's what we did.
See, this is what we've contributed to the world. To kind of wrap us up, let's talk about the great Orson Welles.
I mean,
because he has 2 examples.
I know.
2 very weird examples that you and I researched independently.
Yes.
Of movies that did not get made, that then were posthumously, someone took the work that was done, put it together, and released it with some controversy. Those movies would be Touch of Evil, and then is one, and then The Other Side of the Wind is the other. So
I'll take Touch of Evil. That was the one I looked into, and a little correction: the Touch of Evil was made in Wells's lifetime.
It was.
The movie was finished. It was taken from Wells by the studio.
Okay,
and they did their own thing with it. Now, Touch of Evil. Even as someone who's an Orson Welles fan, Touch of Evil is not a great film. It's got some amazing sequences, and you will watch that and you'll be like, nobody in the history of cinema except Orson Welles has done that. And that's a true statement about Touch of Evil. But what happened with the film is he lost control of it. It was released. Wells panned it. He's like, this is not my movie, not my movie, not my movie. And he wrote something to the effect of like a 58-page memo that went to Warner Brothers that said, this is everything you did wrong, and this is what needs to be done right. So as a object of history, that memo existed. And then when we were going through the DVD and the remake and the re-release and the special edition craze that we've talked about, they asked Walter Murch, famous editor, to take this memo, to take all of the materials of Touch of Evil, and to make Wells's version of this film. And he did. And it's a much better version of Touch of Evil. It makes much more sense. It's much more logical. It's more watchable. But I still have a problem with this, which is it was done posthumously, like you said. And golly, I just feel like even if that memo was followed to the letter, Orson Welles is the kind of guy that still would not have been happy with that. Orson Welles should have just been allowed to do what Orson Welles does, and he should have been allowed to make Touch of Evil.
Is this kind of like, I know it's not exactly like, but kind of like Christopher Tolkien releasing his dad's notes? Like cleaning stuff up and releasing them, even though, posthumously.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like that? Like those are just notes, and I think maybe the Herberts, Brian Herbert and his dad Frank is maybe a better example of this.
So that's a good example, because in today's world, Orson Welles is revered. Everybody's like, this filmmaker was multiple decades ahead of his time. You watch Citizen Kane, which was made in the 40s. If that was released today, you'd be like, yeah, okay, great movie. Really well made, because Welles was just that far ahead of the curve. And so there is now this reverence to Wells's material. And the current people who run Warner Brothers probably look back and say, oh, that was horrible that they took away Touch of Evil from Orson Welles. So that was the spirit that it was done in, right? Like there is this historically significant film.
Kind of giving him back his movie.
Exactly. And I think that the Brian Herbert and the Christopher Tolkien thing, I think that's similar. Yeah. It's like we're revering this work of this visionary. But I still don't know that means it's a good idea. And that's just my take on
interesting. It's interesting, I think in some cases, like the Tolkien case, which I realize that's written word and not movies, but J.R.R. did say his son, you're in charge of my work after this. You can do, you're able to do this. He bequeathed him the Lord of the Rings, right, and all that in that world. Whereas this Orson Welles didn't say, I really want Walter Murch to do this, and then he died, and then Walter Murch did it. So, but it was done based on his notes, right? So it's kind of like the heart was in the right place.
Sure, and if somebody's like, you have to watch Touch of Evil right now, I'd be like, oh, please give me the Walter Murch version. It's a much better movie, but it's still, I still find it a very strange thing, and to extend that example into the world of books, you have a lot of authors who don't publish a word until after they're dead, then they become these big things. I don't know that still gives us the right to do it.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I feel, and the world is no worse off because we have this alternate edition of Touch of Evil. And there was also a preservation aspect to it as well. If the film prints are not taken care of, they deteriorate. They just literally just dissolve into nothing. So doing this was an opportunity to essentially save this movie. But the version they saved, it's closer to Wells's vision. We're getting back to that history.
It's one of those things where Wells probably wouldn't have been satisfied with any of that.
Absolutely.
And
I do agree.
Right. It's like when Lynch, kind of like the Dune thing. Neither of them are on some list of things he wants to talk about, and Wells would have probably felt the same way.
Probably.
He would have drank a giant bottle of champagne and stumbled around. And
yes.
and so interestingly enough, there is another film that has a different history, and that is The Other Side of the Wind, and that is a movie that I've not seen. I just did a little research on this for this, but it was a movie that Wells worked on for years, like 15 years before he died in 1985. It had John Huston as a star, and it was a movie about a director making a movie. So it was a movie inside of a movie, and it was experimental and what you would call avant-garde. In a way, he was almost kind of mocking avant-garde. It was an interesting framing device that he created. It was a criticism of film at the time, and he had worked on it, never completed it, and after he died, he died in 1985. It was taken, edited, finished, and put together and released on Netflix, I believe in 2022, right?
It's pretty recent.
So very recently. So you're talking, almost 30 years after, no, it was almost 40 years after Wells's death. They've come back and done this. To me, I don't know how I feel about that. I've not seen the movie. The movie sounds nuts, and it doesn't sound like something I would enjoy at all. But the idea of this, and I'm sure there are other examples, but none are with a director as big as Wells, right? I guess maybe like Spielberg finishing AI.
Oh, that's a good example.
After the death of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
That's maybe an example. But I think Kubrick said, you can, right? This is yours, if because he was really old. Maybe. I think that was that he blessed the idea of having...
I don't know the history there.
Yeah, but it's an interesting idea. After they're dead, if they have incomplete works, is it right to take them, put them together, and to show them?
I'm going to come down on the side of I don't think so. It just doesn't sit well with me. I will give them all the benefit of the doubt. Again, I think that the motivation to finishing this film comes from a reverence for Orson Welles. I think their hearts were in the right place. But that doesn't always mean we're going to make good decisions with those hearts. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that it's fine. I have no issue with this. And I think this comes down to my view of art and who owns it. And I don't mean own in a legal sense, right? I'm talking about something else, right? In a more, maybe own is the wrong word, but once art is released in some form, art broadly, I think it becomes, in a sense, everyone's property. And people can interpret it as they choose. And property, again, wrong word, because it implies some sort of legal ownership, and that's not really the case. But I think once it's out there and then people start to appreciate it or hate it, then it's fair game for interpretation or in some form of professional revision. I really hate the amateur revision, as long as the original is in some form kept together. And if there is no original, if it's just a bunch of notes, I think it's fine, just as long as you say up front, this is what we did. I think often those things turn out poorly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have a problem with it.
I was, as you were saying that, I was pretty hard going to say I disagree. But your comment that as long as they state that's what they did,
yeah,
that's valid. And again, nobody is finishing The Other Side of the Wind because, I hated Orson Welles. I'm going to throw this out there and
put this terrible cut together that makes him look bad.
That's not what's happening. So I'll give them some grace. I'll give them some leeway.
So I have a question for you. If we had built a time machine and somebody went back in time and got Vincent van Gogh and brought him to modern day and said, here, Vincent, look at your painting, Starry Night. It's probably the second most iconic painting in the world after Mona Lisa, even though Starry Night's way better.
Oh, I thought you were going to say after the Roku screensaver.
Oh, that's pretty good, too. The one with the city? I love that. Yeah, okay. Maybe it's the third. But anyways, Vincent, look at this. Look at your beautiful people. People come from all over. I know you were poor. You were the literal starving artist. But look at this. And he goes, you know what? I need to slap a few different things on there. And I'm thinking about putting a park bench there, and kind of maybe in the buildings. And I don't know. I saw some satellite dishes. Those are pretty cool. I'm going to put those on. That's a ridiculous example. But if the artist creates something wonderful and puts it out there, right, and they wanted to go back and slap some more paint on it, that would not retain the original. No, everyone would say, oh, no, you're insane. If you want to paint something new, go paint something new. Don't change this because it's forever and it's permanent and it belongs to the people who can appreciate it, interpret it. I think movies, I kind of sort of feel the same way about it. I guess my whole thing comes down to revise all you want, retain the history, and as long as the history is retained, I'm cool with it. But the whole idea of changing something permanence, I don't know.
It's a difficult prospect to swallow, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot about time-traveling Vincent van Gogh tonight. A lot.
I would love it if we did that and Vincent said, "Oh, you got the second version of Starry Night."
Yeah.
These I did much better ones.
There's just so many. We're burning all of our Vincent van Gogh material right here. We will not be able to have it. And the kids are like, Orson Welles and Vincent van Gogh, you guys are crazy. I thought the Dorfon golf reference was they were all fired up on that in the previous episode. But now we're talking about Vincent van Gogh and Orson Welles.
It's hard to be as famous as we are, Dave.
It's tough. Well, especially after this episode. To kind of bring it to a head, what did we learn today? I don't know. I think this is actually, it's fun to talk about these movies, but it's really more a question of art and its importance. And we use movies as a framing device. And when you see a beautiful photograph or a painting or a movie, at that point, revising it, does that break your heart? Do you care? And who has the right to do that? It is a very difficult question.
Well, it is a very difficult question. And even in the topics that we brought today, we've bounced back and forth. I mean, do I want the original untouched Blade Runner? Absolutely not. I want the modified, the corrected one, and then we could go down the list and we kind of, depending on the topic, we go back and forth.
It's a tough question to answer. And
I will say that if I had to pick one, and it was within my power, even if it meant that I would lose my precious Blade Runner, I would come down on the side of history. I think that's important.
That is very interesting. And I'm glad we don't have to pick one with most of these.
I agree.
And barring Star Wars and the ridiculousness of that, most of these directors have been very kind to their fans, but also kind to the movies and respecting that, hey, I released this, and whether or not I was completely satisfied with it,
right? Someone
appreciated it, and if I take that away from them, I've devalued my art, right? I don't know, but here's the point, and here's actually kind of the point of the whole episode, is you can find maybe a movie that you don't like so well, or a movie that you love, and you can experience it in a different way, maybe just a slightly different way, or maybe in a huge different way. This is an interesting and bigger question than most of the ones that we ask.
You know what that means?
What does that mean?
We turn it over to our listeners.
Oh, that's right.
Email us. Tell us what you think. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What movie alternates are your favorites?
Warner Brothers. Email us and sue us because we have leaked a new ending to Oppenheimer.
I don't want Warner Brothers.
It's not Warner Brothers, is it? Is it Sony?
I don't remember.
No, Warner Brothers. It's not Warner Brothers. He departed.
He
I think it was Universal. It was Universal.
So, no, I do not want... well, in that case, Warner can sue us all they want.
Right.
Because that's going to get thrown out of court.
Yeah.
But, I do want to know if you've pre-ordered the special edition of Oppenheimer with the extra ending.
Well, I got it. I already own it.
Oh, okay. So you didn't just get the clip. You got the whole thing.
I got the whole thing. Wow. I can't... Wow. I can't release all of it.
No, of course.
Of course. I mean... the internet would be literally broken.
If you want to petition Dave to release it, you can find us at 2middleageguys.com. That's 2, the numeral 2, middleageguys.com. From there, you can find us on our socials. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your fine listening material. And you can read some words that Dave has written that do, in fact, form coherent sentences.
Occasionally.
I can
Mostly.
confirm that, ladies and gentlemen. So hit us up. Send us an email. Let us know what you think. Because we will absolutely change everything about this podcast based on your feedback.
Oh, yeah. Right. I plan on revising this from now until forever.
Yeah. So be prepared for TMAG, the director's cut. It's coming.